Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Today we're going to be looking at another one of the trap tree skills. I think this is the last one, actually, unless I do decide to go back over and redo the Blade Sentinel, Blade Fury, Blade Shield videos, which they kind of do need to be redone because they got patched. But that's neither here nor there. Today we're going to be talking about Death Sentry. So Death Sentry is an ability that is not really that great in terms of damage. It doesn't really have a whole lot of bonus synergies like, say, for instance, Lightning Sentry does, which has 2 synergy bonuses. Death Sentry only has 1, and the lightning damage per level really doesn't matter all that much on Death Sentry because, well, you're not really worried about the lightning damage. I know, it fires lightning, and the lightning that it fires can do some damage, but for the most part, you don't really care. Yes, that's right. Death Sentry really only has 1 synergy, which is even really all that amazing, and I know I'm covering it up, but it is Fire Blast plus 1 shot per 3 levels. The Fire Blast plus 1 shot per 3 levels gives you more shots on Death Sentry if you have the Fire Blast ability. If you don't have it, then you're going to have a lot less shots, and a lot of people will just 1-point wonder Death Sentry because you really don't need more than that. Why is Death Sentry so amazing? Well, it's because it's basically Corpse Explosion, although it's kind of not Corpse Explosion. So what you do with Death Sentry is you fire it off and you utilize it to dish out massive amounts of damage to large groups of monsters. Most notably like cow levels and things like that. It can definitely be very interesting in. If you utilize it correctly, you will get a situation where you have things like this. So you're going to put, say, like 1 Death Sentry, and then you put a couple of the others down, and then you get some nice little corpse explosions and things, which will help kill other stuff. So we get our little popping corpses going on, which is going to dish out damage to everything. Of course, you have to do both, though. That's the thing. So you can't just do one or the other. You got to do both of them. And once you have both of them up, you have your corpse explosions going off, dishing out a pretty massive amount of damage. And then you also have your lightning sentries killing stuff so that your corpse explosions can actually get the actual damage off. Now, Corpse Explosion has a pretty large radius when you level up the ability, so the higher the ability is, the higher the radius goes. And this is actually something that's pretty darn cool when it comes to Corpse Explosion, is that you can pretty much make it hit like the entire screen. As you can see right now, it's currently at a radius of 9.6 yards, and it is 10 yards when I level it up, right? So if I dump 20 points into this, it will go to, let me go ahead and reset this because I have my doojink. My doojink's all messed up here. Alright, so let's go ahead and dump as many points as we can into it, and let's see how high it goes. So it looks like we cap out at 16 yards, which is not bad. And 16 yards is pretty far. If you have ever used an Infinity with Conviction on it, or you've played a Paladin with Conviction, Conviction Aura goes 13.3 yards, which means that our current Death Sentry is now going further than Conviction does, which means it's going to hit most of the screen. And what this means is that when you kill a monster, let's say a monster has, I don't know, 10,000 life. Corpse Explosion is going to do 40 to 80% of that monster's life in damage to everything around it in a circle. It does this in 2 forms of damage. It actually is half physical, and it is half fire damage. So it is not just one or the other. It's half physical, half fire. So if the monster has 10,000 health and you have 80% of their health, you're going to do 8,000 damage if you hit the 80% mark. And that 80% damage is going to hit everything on the screen within 16 yards. It's going to be 4,000, comprised of 4,000 physical damage and 4,000 fire damage, and it's going to go up against the resistances of the target in both respective elements. Amplified damage helps out Death Sentry a lot because it gives you the bonus physical damage, which will help out the 4,000 physical side of things. If you have negative fire resistance, conviction, things like that are lowering the enemy's fire resistance and whatnot, then that will help out the 4,000 fire damage portion of the attack. And because it is actually 2 elements, it's actually surprisingly good for killing monsters that might be immune to your main element, say lightning, because it's dishing out fire and physical. So if you are, for instance, a lightning traps in, then you have 3 elements. You have lightning here, you have fire and physical here. Now, the main problem with Corpse Explosion is that it requires corpses, and you don't always have corpses available to you. So while Death Sentry will be very nice to utilize, say, for instance, in the cow level when you're fighting cows, it's not quite as amazing when you're fighting, say, Diablo, when there's basically no corpses around him, or when you're fighting Baal and there's no corpses around him. At that point, Death Sentry becomes kind of moot and doesn't really have much point other than, well, just looking pretty. In fact, you generally just wouldn't even cast it in those situations because you know that it's less damage than the other traps that you may have available to you. Now, you don't necessarily need to put a whole bunch of points into it, though, because the damage doesn't actually go up with levels, only the radius goes up. And the radius is actually pretty nice, though, I will admit. Having a really high radius Corpse Explosion is frickin' just... it's beautiful, especially when you're on the cow level and it blows up and it hits literally like the entire screen of cows and it dishes out massive amounts of damage. It's really just about that massive amounts of damage that it can put out. At lower levels, it's not like too ridiculously bad, but the radius is kind of pathetic if you don't really have a decent amount of plus skills. And to show you this, let me just go ahead and reset this again. And let me take out some of these chamois so that I don't have as many plus skills on me right now. And without all my plus skills, we go ahead and put a point in here. And we're looking at level 3, we have 4 yards. So as you can see, not really as amazing. 4 yards is pretty much just like melee range. A couple points in, we start going up to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. As you can see, with a couple plus to skills and things like that, it goes up to a pretty decent number of yardages. And once you start getting into the higher levels on the skill, you can really get it to a decent amount of range. My suggestion to you is, even if you're going to 1-point wonder it, basically, never don't put anything more than just 1 point into it. You're probably going to want at least enough plus to skills to get it to a decent amount of radius. I would recommend at least around like 8 yards. 8 yards would be decent, but not terrible. Anything less than that, and you're really not getting the best out of the ability. But personally, I think Corpse Explosion really shines when it's maxed out, because it hits, like I said, pretty much the entire screen, and when it hits the entire screen, it just does so much more damage. You got to imagine that, say for instance, you had, I don't know, let's use a cow as an example. Let's say the cow has 20,000 HP, right? So you got 80% of 20,000, which is what, 16,000 HP. And you hit like 3 cows. That's like, that's like 48,000 damage, right? But let's say there's like 100 cows on the screen, right? So 100 cows are on the screen right now, and you have 16-yard radius on your Death Sentry, and you hit all 100 cows. You've now done 1.6 million damage. Potentially even, and this is the really important thing, is that as Death Sentry kills targets, it creates more corpses, which are more potential corpse explosions. So the larger the radius of corpse explosion, the more monsters that die. The more monsters that die, the more monsters that can be exploded, and the more damage that can be dealt. And before you know it, you may actually explode all 100 of those cows that you hit, dishing out 160 million damage, basically to everything nearby. Of course, it's not actually going to be that much, because as you kill each cow, those cows are no longer going to take damage. So when you deal out your first corpse explosion and 3 cows die, you've got 3 more corpses, but now there's only 97 cows on the playing field, etc. So as the number of cows diminish, the damage actually diminishes with it. But it's just absolutely amazing in the way that it can dish out damage just simply from 1 corpse. Swarming monsters tend to be the best way to see this, and I'm trying to think where I can go other than the cow level. I'm going to go get the leg, but of course we actually have to kill something, which is part of the issue here. Alright, so let me go ahead and put some points into this real quick, just so I actually have a skill to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw a Shockwave on our main hand, we're going to have our Lightning Sentry on our left hand, and then we're going to have our Death Sentry on our right hand. So we're going to go down here, and we're going to hit Lightning, 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 Death. And once we start getting corpses, we're going to put some more death sentries down so we get more corpse explosions. And you see, the corpses are popping pretty fast. There's pretty much no corpses left on the ground. The death sentry's doing a pretty good job keeping most of the corpses cleared. And of course, this character's just not set up properly for this, but she's actually set up to be a martial arts sin, so she's having a hard time with this. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1 death sentry, and we start to get our little explosions. The bodies start popping everywhere, and as you can see, everything dies relatively quickly. Whether you are a trap sin, whether you are a martial arts sin, whether you are some sort of, like blade sentinel sin, or you're a combination of many different things, one thing I can tell you is that 1 point in death sentry definitely does make for a very nice addition to a build. If not maxing it out so that you have the maximum radius. It does require that you cast it every now and then, and personally, I don't like the way that it casts lightning. I kind of wish that Death Sentry was changed so that it doesn't shoot lightning, and instead just simply corpse explodes, because it only has a certain number of charges, and depending, of course, whether or not you build Fire Blast, which increases the number of charges of the ability, you can end up with more or less charges, right? Well, if you cast Death Sentry when there's no bodies on the ground, all it's going to do is shoot lightning. It's not actually going to corpse explode anything. It's going to waste all of those charges shooting lightning, and it doesn't even really shoot lightning all that well. It's not even really that great at it. Even maxed out, it only does about, what, 2,000 damage? Lightning Sentry does like 10,000. Now, one thing you can do is you can get a field of corpses ready, and then throw your Death Sentry down, and that way you can get your corpse explosions. But what you'll notice is that it doesn't pop the corpses unless there's a monster nearby to be affected by it. It's actually kind of interesting, is that it leaves the corpse on the ground until the monster actually gets close enough, and then it will explode the corpse. This means that it doesn't generally waste the corpses, which is kind of nice. If you ever thought that it was wasting the corpses, well, I mean, it still might be wasting them slightly, but it does wait for a monster, at least one monster, to be within range before it does the corpse explosion. It will just leave the corpse on the ground until that point. Now, that also means that the larger the radius is, the better you're going to get with that too, because it's going to wait for the monsters to come in, and then when the first monster is within range, it's going to fire the corpse explosion. But with a larger radius, it's going to hit more monsters in that regard, which is definitely very, very nice. I think that Death Sentry is an interesting one that you can add into any build, but the interesting thing is most of the time I end up avoiding it because it does have kind of a hefty investment here of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. Now, one thing you can do is you can get Death Sentry on your blades. So if you happen to have claws, some pretty interesting claws, you can look for claws that have a +1 or +2 or +3 Death Sentry on it. And what that'll do is that'll just give you the skill, and you won't have to invest these points to get there. So it'll save you 1, 2, 3, 4 points, and you'll have your Death Sentry, so you'll be able to have your cake and eat it too, so to speak. It won't necessarily be maxed out, but you will at least get Death Sentry to be able to cast to do the corpse explosions when you need to. There's really not a lot more when it comes to Death Sentry. Corpse explosion is OP. That's pretty much the gist of it. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just talking about Death Sentry. And I do believe that this actually wraps up the Assassin. Although I may, like I told you, redo the Blade videos. I'm not entirely sure about that yet. I'll think about it. As always, thanks for watching, and keep watching.